So I've had the Ricoh GRIIIx for a little over a year now. It's almost been a year and a half, and it's been a fantastic camera. I've loved working with it. It fits my style really well, and it gives me exactly what I'm looking for in a daily carry photo camera. And if you want to know more about why I picked up this camera and sold off my Fuji X100V, there's a handful of videos on my YouTube channel all about it. And I've been thinking about doing a Ricoh versus Fuji video because I've spent 3+ years with the Fuji. I'm going on 2 years with the Ricoh, and I've had a lot of experience, and I feel like as a filmmaker I have a very unique position and perspective on these types of cameras. But with all that said, today I want to walk you guys through how I edit my Ricoh photos, and I picked out 55 photos from 2023 and 2024. And some will be pretty quick to edit, some will not, and we'll be able to build a bunch of presets and copy and paste throughout the photos. Everything I shot was in RAW, in aperture priority with the highlight metering. I really want to make a video about how I shoot and expose and I guess frame up my photos with the Ricoh, because there's a lot of cool tools built into this camera, and essentially I just treat it as a point and shoot, but it's been really, really fun. So yeah, let's jump into the screen recording and get editing away. So yeah, you'll see all the photos here. They are in chronological order. So I had some photos early on when I got the camera. They didn't really make it into this list, but we pretty much have it. Where's the date? May 26, 2023 to November 24, 2024. So we have a wide range of photos from the last couple years, and also a wide range of lighting scenarios and compositions. Granted, I see a lot of mountains. I love the mountains. All right, so let's jump into the first photo here. This is from a little boat tour off the coast of Kauai. First things first, I like going into the profiles. There are camera matching profiles, I think, built in. I don't know if I had to download these after buying the Ricoh, but these are essentially the Ricoh profiles that you'll see in camera. And I tend to just kind of stick between negative film and positive film. Sometimes I'll go into the monochromes if I'm really feeling the black and whites, but for this photo in particular, I'm kind of thinking we lean with negative film. And I have been a huge fan of cropping my photos, and I really like the 5x4 framing. Sometimes you don't need the whole 3x2 frame. It feels a little too wide sometimes, and as a cinematographer, I'm constantly shooting wide, or I guess in 16:9. So it's nice to have like more of a square kind of format. So first off, we'll dial in our exposure. Looking at the histogram here, it's looking a little bright, but we are going to dial this in. And not much has changed from my Fuji photos, but I tend to like a little bit more contrast and try to make that highlight roll off really smooth, but keep the white points like really rich and bright. And a lot of that has to do with the curve here. And over the years, I've been playing with different types of S-curves, and this is like your natural, normal S-curve, and that's good and all, but sometimes I've been liking dropping that high white point, which is where like clipping would be, dropping that a bit to force everything down a bit, and then you bring in the highlights next to it, and I feel like that just like rolls off really well, and then we could bring contrast down. And I don't want it to be too dark, like that's way too punchy. But if I can just like kind of finesse that a bit and bring up the midtones, that looks pretty good there. We'll move down into white balance. It's looking a little too cool. So let's try 6,000. It's looking pretty good there. And it's all about the finesse. We have a lot of blue in the scene here, so I'm thinking bringing up the brightness or luminance, and then maybe desatting it a tiny bit. Go to the turquoise, because sometimes turquoise is found in this scenario. You can see it at the bottom of the photo there. I like kind of going like with the 1-2 punch with turquoise and blue, and being able to up the saturation on turquoise like kind of fills in that dead space a little bit more. And with editing these photos, it really just depends on like the mood that I'm in. Sometimes I'll bring in like the color grading, like little 3 wheels here, go cool in the shadows, warm in the midtones and highlights. That kind of creates like a little nice like morning sun kind of scenario. And then with the texture, I like dropping that a little bit, -10, clarity -10, and then grain we'll do like 30 and then make it a bit bigger. So that makes it feel more of like a nostalgic film photo, and I actually really like that. For some reason, Adobe Lightroom, just normal, auto adds 40 sharpening, which I really don't like. So I dropped that down. It's still looking a little bright, so I think dropping the exposure a tiny bit and then upping the blacks and shadows. So there's before, there's after. It's looking a little bit warm, 5600, and then maybe add a bit more contrast. All right, I'm cool with that. So here's before, pretty clean, pretty sharp, and then after. Definitely different than what I'm used to, but I really like it. All right, so because the next photo is from the same like time and place, like it was on the same trip, because it's a similar kind of lighting scenario, I like to copy and paste those settings if I want to run with that specific style that I just did. So let's copy our settings, and I like to go in to choose settings to copy, and then just making sure that all the things that we used are there. Go to the next photo, paste that on, and that's like not really the vibe that I'm looking for. It's already looking a little too cool. So I really like the contrast in the highlights in this little scenario, but I do want to warm it up a bit more. And I think around the 7,000 mark looks pretty good. You can see the highlights are getting a little too washed out. So let's bring that top point up and then the highlights up a bit more. Midtones down. You can see how it adjusts on the ocean and the mountains. Kind of adds a little bit more detail and like makes it a bit more dramatic. Yeah, I like that little contrast at the bottom there. That's looking pretty nice. There's before, there's after. Beautiful colors out of the sensor. All right, next photo is from the same trip. You can see the kind of boat that we're on. There's my wife, Melissa. Paste those settings. It's looking a little dark, but I'm not really minding it. So let's adjust the crop, exposure up. Yeah, that's a good spot for the exposure there. I'm looking at the highlights on her shoulder and the ocean. I think just dropping that all the way down to -100 looks pretty good. It kind of just retains that little hot spot there a bit more. We bring the whites up and then the curve down a bit just to really smoothen out those little bright zones. And one thing you're probably noticing is that I don't like nitpick my photos. Like I haven't gone into the spot healing. I haven't gone into the gradients and masking and all that. I try to keep my photos as authentic and real as possible, but I just edit them to make them like fit my style a bit better and like make them a bit nicer. And like I tend to treat my stuff like film, but like I guess you could go pretty intense and like start masking everything, but just not my style. All right, so I'm looking at the colors now. Everything's looking pretty good. The greens, like maybe just like desat that a bit, darken a bit, just kind of takes your eye off of back there. Look at the yellows and the oranges for the skin tone. You can see the yellow affecting the grass at the top. Just probably just keep that normal. And then the oranges, that's mostly skin tone. So I don't mind like adding sat and luminance. Kind of makes the skin pop. And then the color grading, that actually looks pretty good. The cool shadows and warm midtones and highlights, I'm down. There's before, there's after. It's a pretty good one. I like that. All right, so now we're on to the next one. This is from the same trip. We're in Kauai. We're probably in Kauai for the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 photos, maybe 4. I don't know if those palm trees are from Kauai, but this is a quick little snap while driving. I liked this one as a black and white. So we'll go into the camera matching. It depends on the photo, but like for stuff like this, I like the soft monochrome. And let's see how fast I can edit this one because we have a lot of photos to go through and it's already been like 14 minutes. Oh no. Contrast down, highlights down, shadows up, whites up, blacks down. That is like the Thomas classic, but we're gonna go in and just crank that S curve down. We'll maybe soften the shadow curve a little bit more. I don't want it to be like too dark. That's looking nice and soft. Actually, I do want a bit more shadow there. Up the contrast. That's looking nice. And you can do color grading for your black and white photos, which I don't like doing. I guess you can like introduce like cool and warm tones, but like, I don't know. I'm not into it, at least for this photo. Let's do our crop. Forgot to do that. 5x4. Kind of line it up center with the car. And then let's cruise down to the effects again. We'll go minus 30 on the texture. And maybe minus 20 on the clarity. I like doing this because if you look at the texture only, it just kind of helps soften up like the real sharpness of like fine detail. So if you're looking at like the branches or like the bushes here, there's before and after. It just kind of makes it smooth and painterly. And then if you do clarity by itself, so we'll do that at minus 20, it does the same kind of thing, but it tends to bloom edges. So like if you look at the ocean, like cliffside, and then my hand right here, going before and after, it just softens that like highlight gradient really well. So pairing those together tends to work out really well. And then slap some good old grain on top. We'll go 50, and then we'll go like fine grain. Nah, we're gonna go 30 on the grain. We're also zoomed in. Sharpening down. I'm gonna have to do sharpening down on everything. That's looking pretty nice. Let's actually do the size of the grain up. I thought that would work on this one, but for some reason it just looked really busy. All right, so we did 20 grain and then size 30. Roughness. Let's actually drop that. I never really adjust roughness. I kind of just like let it rip, but I like where that's at. There's before, there's after. Solid. Solid, solid, solid. Loving the photos from the Ricoh so far. All right, now we're moving on. Let's try to speed this baby up a little bit. 5x4. Another really sharp photo. I'm thinking we go into... Ooh. Positive film looks pretty good. Let's favorite that. All right. Let's start with a curve here. I want to do a reverse curve from what we did before, but still bring the midtones up and then bring the clipping point down. And you can see from just a tiny bit of exposure lift, the camera profile, and then that S curve, that is looking pretty nice. I want the highlights in the sky to feel rich. I don't want to see like all that cloud detail, but I want to know that there's like a little bit there. So we're just going to bring the highlights down a tiny bit, contrast up a little bit, bring the shadow detail up, whites up a tiny bit, and then blacks down. So this is just like the light, like little panel. Okay, we bring shadows down. And exposure down. That's looking pretty nice. See, on some of the other photos, I didn't do vibrance and saturation. Like, it doesn't really matter on a lot of these things, especially for like personal stuff. Like, it's not a big deal. Greens are getting affected. There's some green in the ocean you can see there. Yellow is probably going to go nuclear on these trees. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a pretty good spot. For the midtones, let's go warm at the shadows, but not too crazy. Warm at the midtones, and then cool highlights. I'm not liking that. Let's bring the midtones down. There's before and after. I mean, it kind of works. Texture, we'll do like -20, -20. Could do like a crazy vignette there. Nah, we'll keep it chill. 25 grain, 40 size, 30 roughness. Bring that stupid sharpening down. Just looking at the combo of literally everything, but I think mostly the effects panel, like paired with the grading, like seeing the trees here in the water, like it just smoothens out so nicely to where it's like as if you had like a pro mist or black satin, but you have the capability and control in post, so you're not married to it after shooting. I don't really love like super bloomed out highlights, but this is just working so well, and it feels like to me it feels like film, or at least it gives the feeling of nostalgia and just like a good memory from that trip. And this is the benefit for me when shooting on digital versus film. Like I can rip through thousands of photos over the course of years and it didn't cost me anything. Like maybe an extra SD card, like if I really need it. But yeah, I'd rather shoot on this little camera than film any day. Like $100 a roll, like all said and done, like get out of here. All right, next photo, little portrait of Melissa. Copy and pasted from that last photo, but I'm not really liking where the skin tones are at. Okay, we'll do from the last photo, then we'll just adjust. But you can see like how soft that's like already looking. Like look at her hair. Like that just blooms so nicely, but we will have to fix the skin tones. Exposure, shadows up. Can bring the highlights down a little bit. Probably play with the S curve a bit more. Yeah, the midtones were up too much. Bring the white point up, highlights up a little bit. And then the white balance is as shot. We could do, vibrance down. Saturation down a little bit. I don't really like really punchy saturation. I like to keep it like chill, for a lack of better words. The orange, we could fill that in a little bit. The yellow's getting lost. We can bring that back up. And then I always like look out for the lips with the red. Like we'll add a little bit back, but that might be a mixture of like the camera profile, like playing with that. Color grading, I don't mind the warm shadows on this and the cool highlights. All right, so moving on, everything should be the same for the grain, detail, and texture. That's looking nice. There's before, there's after. So pretty. Love that. All right, so because the next photo is from Hawaii again, and it's a similar photo to the 2 photos ago, we're gonna copy and paste that over, and look at how rich that is. We're just gonna up the contrast a tiny bit. You can see that like we're kind of losing the shadows, but I did expose for the highlights, so I want to make sure that we preserve those. But I just want to toy around with this little S curve. Like look at what the midtone is doing there. Like it gets really crunchy like the farther up you go, but then it just mellows out when you bring it back down a little bit. So we're just gonna play around here. And I think I want to do like 6800 for the white balance. It's looking pretty nice. For the greens, it's looking a little too intense. We're just gonna bring those back. Like, should we do like 2014? Just completely just nuke the greens? Nah. We're gonna keep it a little natural. For this one, I want to do blue-ish shadows and then go back to like the warm highlights. This one's feeling like doing the blue shadows made it feel like really stormy and gloomy, which it was stormy and gloomy. So maybe we'll just take the white balance up just to kind of offset that a little bit and then punch a little bit more orange in the midtones. I'm liking that. Different. There's before, there's after. It feels just richer and smoother and cleaner. It's just so nice to have a lot of detail and depth in these raw files to be able to really make it your own. Okay, we're only like 7 photos in. I gotta pick up the pace. Copy, paste, another Hawaii photo. Before, after, no notes. I miss surfing in Hawaii. Palm trees, copy, paste. Dude, I think we made a preset. That is looking so clean. When it comes to palm trees, I don't like going super high with the contrast because all of those little palm branches just tend to look a little too like fake. But this feels like a film photo. Before, after, dude, this is a sick preset. Speaking of presets, I have a Ricoh pack on my website. I will have a black and white pack and a couple other more preset packs as time goes on. Having a newborn is exhausting and I haven't had much time to do a lot of this stuff, but thankfully with work being a little bit slow, I have time for this. So presets on the way, hopefully in the next couple months. Okay, so we copy and pasted that preset from the last one. This is already looking really good, and like we went from Hawaii to San Onofre. I'm loving how warm this feels. It could go warmer too and bring the saturation up. Yeah. I want this just to feel like a nice warm evening as you're hanging out waiting to surf some good waves. Color grading looks good. These effects do so much. Like if I didn't have the texture, clarity, and grain, that's what it would look like. Like it looks good, it's sharp. Like I want to have this feel like film. So add those in and like look at the hill and the little RV and the cars. Like you could see how that just meshes in. More so with the palm tree in the back. Like that's like it's cloudy and kind of like hazy, but now it feels hazy. Like the way it just drifts across the ground. So there's before, there's after. Super clean. All right, moving on to the next one. We are now in Laguna. This one I shot knowing I was going to edit this in black and white. So let's go grab our black and white previous edit. Paste that in. Dude, that is looking clean. I want the cliff to be like kind of silhouetted. So we'll just bring the shadow detail down, but like not too far. Like you want to know that something's there, but like I just don't want to see like every little bit of it. And like if you want to have it super soft and not contrasty, by all means. But for this one, I'm feeling like I kind of want it to be a little bit darker. All right, I'm liking that. There's before, there's after. Lovely. I love how this Ricoh sensor plays with black and white photos. It just looks so good. All right, next one. This is in Huntington. I think I meant for this one to be black and white, but that's kind of boring. So let's try to do a color edit. So we'll copy and paste from one of the photos. And the crop's like a little tough here. So with these low light photos, I don't like having like really intense highlights. Like I want to let it live, but I don't want it to be like bright like that. So we'll just try to finesse it a little bit. It's kind of fun. Whoa, look at like the halation down here with the shadows. This one could probably use some noise reduction, which I've never really used. We'll just add a little bit. Not my favorite, but we got to keep running with it. Before, after. Actually, it's kind of nice. I like it. All right, so this next one is kind of similar to the San Onofre one, so we'll copy and paste that over and then adjust as needed. And dude, 6500 white balance. That, whew, that's looking mint. And I think that's the benefit of like building presets for your photos, but also building them in a way to where like they're not like super like intense. Like that was able to go from the beach to the mountains like pretty easily. But I think it's also like due to how you actually shoot and expose your stuff. Cause like I'm always saving the highlights and I'm always exposing in a similar way. And dude, that looks freaking good. I'm a fan of that. I know this preset's gonna work on this next one. Dude, one and done. Oh my word. Like, just look at the colors. When I posted this photo, granted the way I edited it, the way I colored it previously, I had people ask if it was film or not. Take that as you may. Oh dude, look at the little seagull in the back, freaking chiller. If people are asking if this is film, like dude, is there even a point to shoot on film personally? Like outside of like the art of it? Probably not. At least for me, it's not worth it. I'd rather shoot on this and have my photos right away. All right, so moving on to the next photo. This one was about like, I don't know, 0.2 of a mile away. So we'll copy and paste that. I'm already noticing that I want this to be brighter. That's looking good. I'm also noticing like a little bit too much like happening here. So we're just gonna take the texture down and clarity down a little bit just to massage it a bit more. And dude, if you look at the before and after of clarity, that's the secret sauce. So here's before. Look at how I exposed. I am saving all of the highlights. I don't mind having like shadows fall off into silhouette, but the great thing about these digital sensors is that you can pull them back and that looks beautiful. Big fan. We'll copy and paste because the next one is pretty similar. That is looking a little too bright, and I am noticing that we are still not all the way through, and I need to hurry up. All right. Copy and paste that over. That is looking pretty solid. There's before. There's after. If you guys want to see some of these photos that I hurry through fully edited with like my thought process, let me know and I'll make a Patreon or member video about it. Oh no. I want to show all these photos because I'm so happy with them. But on the other hand, like, do you guys want to sit through like an hour and a half of editing? Probably not. Dude, look at, oh my gosh. The clarity and the texture. Look at what it does to the highlights. There's before. There's after. I am saving this preset after I'm done with this video. Paste it on this one. Another Huntington classic. Seeing the Tacomas cruising down the beach. A little too contrasty. I want to go like a bit more low contrast on this one. Make it feel like it's a bit older than it actually is. So we'll also drop the clarity and texture a bit more and up the grain. Like, dude, like being able to build a preset and then tweak it in a couple little steps and then be happy with it. Like, I would ship that off and like print it or post it. Like, dude, look at just how painterly that looks. Big fan. There's before. There's after. It is crazy how good that looks. All right, silhouetted. We are for sure clipping, which I don't mind in those like specular highlights and then in the sun. But if you look at the sky and like even like the dolphins here, like those aren't clipping at all. Whoop. So I'm pretty happy to start off with that. And we copy and pasted from the last few ones, which it works, but this one's going to take a bit more finesse. Like for sure dropping the highlights all the way down. Like that kind of makes them sparkle a little bit more. Bring up the shadows, drop contrast. If we had like full contrast, I feel like that wouldn't really work too well. Like you could go silhouetted with this, but I think low contrast kind of like fits the style of the shot, especially like with how backlit it is. We'll do 5800 on the white balance. Actually, nah, 63. Am I going to bring it back to where I just had it before? 68? Yeah. Color grading. I like how warm that feels. I might actually punch a little bit more into the midtones. And then pull back on the highlights a tiny, tiny bit. Texture and clarity down. Just to play with those specular highlights. If we were to go before and after the effects, like it just feels very rigid. That feels very dreamy. I'm torn between going like more silhouetted or like bringing the exposure up. Maybe we'll just drop the shadows a bit more. All right. For the sake of time, before, after. It's pretty dope. Next one is another Huntington shot. We'll copy and paste from the previous one. And dude, this, what? That looks like film. We'll bring the exposure up, contrast up a tiny bit. It's looking a little soft though. So we'll bring the clarity like to 20 or negative 25 and then texture about the same. So we pulled those back so there's less. Dude, look at the sign. I'm loving the contrast here. I might want a little bit of magenta in here. That feels more like sunsetty. So there's before, there's after. Now we're cooking. Here is a shot from 395 on my way to the Nissan shoot. And we're going to copy and paste from that previous photo. Yeah. Drop contrast a tiny bit. I want this to feel like early morning desert vibes, which it exactly was. This was taken at like 6 a.m. 7:30 in the morning. I left at like 3 or something. We'll keep the tint. Yeah, we'll keep the tint back. Keep it warm. There's before. There's after. Good old shot from the road. All right, moving on. I'm pretty sure we can copy and paste this over. That is looking way too warm in like pink. What is happening? Let's bring this to like 5700 Kelvin. The tint looks fine there. I definitely want some contrast just because like it gets a little too washed out here. Shadows down. Highlights can go down a bit. Whoa, did not mean to do that. We're gonna go back into the curve and go back to that like first style that we did where shadows are down, midtones are a tiny bit up, highlights are down a little bit, and then the clipping point. If you watch the clouds at the top of the frame, if I bring it down, it just smoothens them out pretty well. It's looking a little too red in there, so I think the shadows need to go cold, and then highlights go warm. Okay, shadows are gonna go like cold green. Midtones are gonna go yellowish. That's feeling very unique. Yeah, I think dropping the saturation a bit and then going into the HSL. I think there's too much red happening. That's what I'm noticing. We could punch some yellow back in and then just tweak the HSL of the orange to the right. So there's before, there's after. Looking pretty sweet. All right, so the next one is a low light scenario. I'm thinking one of these can work. Let's see how that looks. I mean, it works. Let's do it black and white. Where are we at? Come on. Copy. Paste. Yeah, black and white's kind of sick. Let's go moody. Just low contrast, cold vibes. I feel like if it was too crunchy, it would be like, yeah, seen it before. All right, before, after. I honestly don't know why I put this photo and I should have just pulled it out. Oh well. All right, next one, we are back in Hawaii. So I'm thinking one of these presets will work pretty well on this. And that actually looks pretty good. We're gonna crop to the side, exposure down a little bit. I'm noticing a little bit too much bloom, so we can bring the clarity back. And we want it to feel like a nice warm summer day. I'm liking that. Before, after. Again, it doesn't need to be rocket science. You don't need to go through every single color and like spot mask everything. Like I'm noticing the cones back there. Who cares? It's probably not going to be a big deal, and it's not paid work. If it was paid work, you're probably hiring a retouch artist, or you're also really good and you care a lot more. This is going on my personal fake Instagram, TMOS KAUAI, if you want to check out my actual stills photos, because I don't really like posting them on my main page because I want it to be cinematography only. Before, after, we are running with this preset for the next one. I like how it's like Melissa and like some dude. Exposure down. I want this to feel, ooh. Okay, it's getting a little bit too orange and teal for me. So we're just gonna pull that back. Ooh, dude, the gradient on this is kind of sick. It's looking a little warm. 6,000. Dude, this is different than what I would normally do, and I am a fan. Before, after. All right, so moving on to the next one. That is looking too like horror film-esque. So we're just gonna go back to the warm shadows and cool highlights. I tend to always like doing warm midtones. There's just something about it that works for me. Okay, white balance up. Let's bring the shadows down a little bit, and then bring the clipping point down. Midtones up. It's funny how different like this looks compared to here. Like just different time of day. But it's looking too contrasty, so I'm just gonna drop the contrast quite a bit. That's feeling nice. I'll probably be editing this and be like, no, that looks really ugly, and be bummed. But for the sake of the video, here's before, here's after. Pretty dreamy. Next one, same time and place, copy paste. I definitely know I want to drop exposure and then add some contrast back. Before, after. Sick. All right, Yosemite time. Let's copy and paste our favorite preset. That is looking pretty great. A little bit too much bloom. So I think we can drop the contrast and the highlights, bring some shadows back into it, mess with the curve. Just because it's so hazy with water, like I don't want everything to get lost like in the sauce of the bloom. Before, after, big fan of that. This next one, I know I shot this to be a black and white because you could see how I'm just losing so much into the shadows, and I kept the highlights, but we can copy and paste those settings and like it works. But I think if we go into the camera matching tab and do, I think hard monotone, and then kill the grading. And then we can drop the shadows, let that kind of fall off a bit more. Yeah. I like that a lot. Before, after, you still get the hint of the trees, but you get the vibe of what's kind of happening with the mist. And I really like that. Next photo is exposed pretty well. I think we can copy and paste from one of these daytime scenes. Of course, looking a little bright, but that's really easy to fix. Looking a little warm. We could probably do 5800, just a little bit warmer than daylight. Looking a little contrasty, so we could bring the contrast back. Do our little favorite S-curve. Like looking at the highlights on the rocks and also on the skin tones, I'm liking what that is doing when I drop it down. Could drop the clipping point, look at the clouds, that's full, like 100. If I drop that down to like 90, that looks pretty good there too. Exposure up a little bit, shadows up. Still a little bit too much contrast, so we can bring the slider back a bit more. This is a pretty hard scene to try to get low contrast because so much is happening here, but we'll make it work. I don't mind the warm shadows on this. We can actually add a bit more cool highlights. Keep that there. Before and after of the grading. I like that. I think I want to add a bit more to the clarity though. There's before. And there's after. That feels like a good old 35mm film photo. And I am a fan. All right, moving on. Same hike. Copy and paste it from the previous photo. It's looking a little warm. So we can do 5600. And then I know the culprit's probably the grading. So we can bring back the shadows. Yeah. That is looking clean. I am happy with that. Now, sometimes I like to match the contrast, like from shot to shot in certain like series. Like this is from the same hike. So like I could match that. Sometimes it doesn't really matter. Like I just err on the side of if it looks good, send it. So there's before and there's after. We're cruising. Same hike, just different time and place. That is the lower fall, lower fall, lower fall. This is the upper fall. This is Nevada Falls. And dude, I'm liking this clarity and texture. I know I sound like a broken record, but this is like a bit more intense than what I would normally do. And I think I'm going to run with that. Like, it's just so much nicer than running a Pro Mist or a filter. And also, like, I think it gets annoying on this camera to do that. Before, after, big fan. This one, you can see it's silhouetted pretty heavily. It's going to be a black and white. Copy and paste, and dude, that looks intense. Woo. Before, after. I love that detail on the tree and like how the sky falls off to like a pretty dark, assuming blue, and the cloud detail behind this dead tree is so sick. For this next one, we're gonna copy probably from here, paste that over. It's looking a little too soft in the contrast, so we drop exposure, up contrast, and I like that. Like, look at how sharp and detailed it is in the tree here. When I bring it back, like, it just softens up and smoothens out all of those little things. And it's crazy how much detail this camera actually picks up. So here's before and after. Love that. Next one I knew was gonna be a black and white. There's just really not much happening here with the color. Is this loaded? Or is that just soft? Did I misfocus here? Tight. Send it. Make that uber dreamy. There's before, there's after. I think I pulled the wrong photo for this one, so editor Thomas will have to throw in this grade on the actual photo. Whoops. Next one, we were leaving this trip to go up to Kyle's family cabin, and it was dumping snow. So I want this to be color just because like I love shooting color in the snow, and like you could go black and white and like have it look pretty sick, like especially if you like drop that down, but nope, we're gonna go color on this just because like it pops so well. And just eyeing those skin tones, making sure it's not too bright or like too washed out. Bring the reds back. Orange is that. There's before, there's after. I like this one. I like it a lot. Next one, pregnancy announcement photo. Copy and pasted from the previous one. It's looking a little bright, so we could bring that down, contrast down. I want that to feel really soft. I'm looking at the highlights on her stomach. I don't want it to be like this hot and bright. I want it to feel like a little bit in between. And right about there is looking pretty nice. There's before, after, so nice and smooth. Now we're on the coast of California up north, black and white, copy and pasted from that tree photo. This one's looking a little dramatic, so I'm thinking we could do the soft monochrome and just kind of run with it from there. So I'm really liking this. It's looking a little too washed out, so I want to bring some of the contrast back in the low end, in the midtones. There's before, there's after. I kind of wish I took this photo like panned over a bit more to the right, but that's how it goes. Sometimes you miss, but I still like that photo a lot. All right, next one, we're gonna try at a speed. Oh, we're almost done. Okay, next one, this should edit pretty well. This one has like kind of a similar lighting scenario and framing. Copy and pasted that over. It's looking a little too like uniform with the yellows and greens, and I think if we tone back the midtones a bit, we can get it there. I wish I had some lo-fi beats going on, but I'm sure glad I have it for the edit and not for this. I think it's looking pretty good. Yeah. I don't want to go too crazy with the grading. Yeah. Before, after. That looks pretty nice. I like that. We'll copy and paste to this next one. That works really well. Shadow down. Just to actually shadow up and then mid-tone down. That looks nice. I like how soft that looks. Could tweak that a little bit. Before, after. That's looking and feeling really nice. Copy and paste for the next one. Boom. That is, I think, pretty dead on to what I did like on my own time. Before, after. Good old Silver Lake Resort General Store. I wanted that to feel like very nostalgic and like soft, like a film photo. I think it does. I think it looks pretty good. This next one, of course, another silhouette. That's gonna be a black and white, so copy and paste over. I like how intense that looks, but we're actually gonna crop in like a bit more. Just focus on how intense that looks against the sky. There's before, there's after. It's looking pretty nice. That's the first time I think I've actually like punched in on my cropping, whereas the other ones I just like adjust side to side. For this next one, we have like another like nice lighting scenario. Like there's only a couple things being crushed in the blacks, nothing being clipped in the whites. So we're just gonna grab our preset, toss that over, and just bring the composition over so she's on the third. Exposure up, mess with the shadows a bit. The midtones can actually go down. Like look at like the ratio of her legs and the trail. If it's up, it's a little bit too like contrasty, but if we bring it down, it kind of like mellows it out a bit more. There's before, there's after. We're gonna copy that for the next one. It's already looking a little bright, so we could drop that down, and dude, this is looking so good. Just kill the saturation on the red. It's looking a little too much. Look at the grading. I really like how subtle that grading is. It just feels like nice and warm and inviting. So there's before, there's after. Man, loving what we're doing here in this video. All right, so we're gonna copy and paste for this next one. It's looking a little dark, but some exposure can fix that. And dude, it's looking nice. The green's looking a little like fake. So we could drop the luminance and then adjust the hue to make it feel like not as like neon green. And I think inviting more of the warmth in the shadows and the midtones can kind of help that out a bit more. Yeah. And then we'll drop white balance. Oop. I meant 6,000. I love like the tree line to the mountains and like how that like kind of blooms over. So there's before, there's after. Loving that a lot. All right, for this next one, we're gonna copy and paste the settings because they're pretty similar. No notes. Before, after. Dude, that's the benefit of building these presets and using them in like lighting scenarios and also like scenes and tones. It actually works out pretty well. This one, we're actually gonna use the same preset and then just up the exposure a bit. It's looking a little too contrasty, so I wanna soften that up. Soften the midtones and actually bring the whites down. Like it's crazy how quickly that went from like bad to like, I actually kind of like this. Before, super like not underexposed, but I was definitely saving for highlights even though there's like not much there. So I probably kind of buffed it, but then we recovered it and it looks pretty good. I like that. For this next one, we're actually gonna copy from the other mammoth photo. I don't know how this one made it in. Those might have been two different trips. I love this photo so much. Like just seeing the fall foliage and this beautiful lake up in Mammoth. So I want this to feel nostalgic, but not like fake nostalgic. So I think we'll just tweak these a little bit. I really like dropping the midtones down, like looking at the trees. Like that looks too bright. But if you bring it down, like it just makes it feel so painterly. And I know it's kind of a cop-out word, but like, I mean, it kind of is. White balance looks good. The colors look good. Maybe the yellows we could just bring back to normal. The greens we could bring back to like green and not so warm. Color grading adds so much. Like that makes it feel so warm. There's before. Saving for all of the highlights. Is there anything being crushed? A little bit down here, but who cares about that? Nothing being clipped, exposed perfectly, and we have a beautiful photo from that. There's before, there's after. Big fan. Copy, paste, same kind of scenario. Like this photo is taken to the right of this photo. So similar setup. Actually, I want that to be less contrasty and like a little bit brighter. Shadows down. Let's run with it. Before, after, liking that a lot. This next one we'll copy from that previous lake photo. Adjust the composition, bring exposure down a tiny bit, contrast down a tiny bit. I know I want the white balance to go to like 6400. It's looking a little magenta, so bring it back down to green a bit. There's before, there's after. It's nice being able to like paste a preset and have like the base of like the grading and the colors and the effects and your grain and sharpening, and then you're just able to go through the light and the curves if need be, and maybe the white balance, and like it makes it pretty consistent to have that kind of like effect hierarchy, but then just fine tune your contrast and lighting. Like it works really well, and as you see, it's pretty fast. Copy and paste to this one. This one I want to feel like it's out in the middle of nowhere, because it is, but I also want it to feel just like kind of desolate and dreary. So we're gonna go low contrast on this. I'm liking that. There's before, super detailed and just like sharp and digital. And then that feels just like smooth. Like I want to be out there at this very moment. We'll copy and paste for this one. Ooh, I like how low contrast this one is. It feels like very rich. And to make it like feel richer, we're gonna pump like a lot more into the whites. Like for some reason, like adjusting that just makes it feel a bit more polished, which I don't know why. We'll actually bring up the contrast a tiny bit. I don't want it to be like too intense on the horse here, but just enough just to give like a little bit more in the low end. Let's go into the curves a tiny bit for that. There's before, perfectly exposed for the highlights. That's the highlight metering that I'm talking about. And then after, it produces such a good image. Copy and paste to this next one. Dude, I'm not touching that. There's before, there's after. We only adjusted the crop. It's pretty sick. All right, copy and pasting for this next one. This is looking a little dark, so we'll bring that up. And you also might have noticed that I'm not like straightening my horizons. I used to be a stickler about it, and I used to get so weird and like obsessive about it, but now like I could care less. Like I'd rather just have like the photo as it was. I feel like that's more meaningful, instead of like trying to make it so perfect and edit it all in post to make it as good as possible. Like I just don't care about that anymore. Like I'm not trying to shoot bangers like that. The green's looking a little funky. Actually, if I like leave the yellow at normal sat, that actually looks pretty bad. We'll leave the sat down a bit. Not too bad. Since this is like so detailed, I think we're gonna add a bit more in the grain and then drop the clarity and texture. Just because like everything's kind of far away and there's not too much happening in frame. Like if we did that on a previous photo like this, it would feel overwhelming. But since there's not really much there, I feel like we can kind of afford like a little bit more on those effects. I like that. So there's before, perfectly exposed, saving all the highlights. I think we're only losing, yeah, the shadows of those people there. Then there's after, pulls back really nicely. So that was 55 photos, and editor Thomas is bummed right now. I hope you guys got a lot of value out of this video. I hope it was fun to watch and you learned a lot about my editing process and just being able to take things from this and then turn it into your own style and just to be able to use it in your own workflow. This Ricoh camera is a fantastic camera and it's been so fun to shoot with, and I still kind of want like a Leica at some point. Like we can get into that in my Ricoh review, but this camera's just been a blast and it's so easy to carry around. Like I could bring it on my jobs. I could throw it in a fanny pack or my pocket. And it's just such a nice companion to be able to get photos like this that are more fun to shoot and more fun to edit and also more fun to look at compared to iPhone photos. Like I love actual cameras and like this is as small as I can get. So it's pretty sick. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you have any questions about the Ricoh or the Fuji or whatever else, feel free to leave those down below. And yeah, again, I have Ricoh presets that I'll link down below in the description if you want to check out some BTS content and just some more informal videos. I also have a YouTube membership page or Patreon. It's kind of up to your pick. So yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.